All right, so it's my pleasure to now introduce our last reader, Angelina Leaños. When family stories are told, you can trust that Angelina will be listening and taking notes. It's through this listening, this act of human care, that you can also trust Angelina to take these stories into the full embrace of her safekeeping. This is a poet who will sit with these stories and their painful realizations for as long as necessary. A poet who recognizes the value of documenting family history and preserving language. And a poet who will guard these stories with the ferocity of her page until they emerge on the other side as poems. To confront both the shadows and the light of one's family history, and to learn of the deep sorrow and joy therein, are crucial to shaping a sense of identity and renewal moving forward. How does a poet honor her ancestors while acknowledging the harms that have been committed? And what of a grandfather who chose to put an end to a cycle of generational trauma and who, as a result, chose a better future for his descendants? Angelina's thesis, titled Bloodtree Blooming, brings together a remarkable series of project poems exploring the life and struggles of her grandfather, who was raised in a home rife with toxic masculinity. The choice he made to release himself from those toxic binds has rippled for the better through generations. And perhaps the most beautiful part of that story is that it would find its way to the grandchild in the family who would one day become a poet and build a body of creative work around his life. This work serves as a reckoning and testament acknowledging the trauma he experienced. And while many of the poems grieve the hardships that he suffered, the poems also celebrate the love he generously shares. Across the collection is a meticulous range of work that displays Angelina's unique ability with poetic craft. From concrete and visual structures to photographic deconstructions, from contrapuntal assemblages to poems set as instructions, and from stage directions to incantations, along with so much more. Many of the poems also serve as direct addresses to her grandfather, as a means to seek, inquire, and commune with the lineage that brought her into being. The poems also look deeper into that lineage to reflect on her great-grandfather and the challenges of toxic behavior impacting the relationship. Taken together, the collection is an homage to the strength of a family. It is gratitude bestowed to a grandfather as it radiates from the words and artistry of a grandchild who, like her much-beloved elder, has chosen to uphold compassion. And this collection brings to the surface a speaker who, in the midst of all this listening, searching, and confronting the past, has proudly grounded herself in the queer love of her future. Angelina, what a wondrous thing you've created here. I watched you put your whole heart into this thesis, from every poem to every draft, and these are the kinds of gifts that last forever. I'm so grateful to have walked beside you in that process. And please help me now welcome Angelina Leaños.
Okay, thank you so much to all of you for being here. I have so many notes of gratitude to give. Of course, my thesis committee, Mai Der, Bryn, Marcelo Hernandez Castillo, who all provided such beautiful letters of feedback for my work. And all my love goes to my family and my friends for supporting me, not just in creating this thesis, but being here in Fresno. It was a big decision for me to leave the community that I made back home. And I'm so lucky that I found a community here with you all. So, thank you to my cohort, especially Chu, Hua, Miguel. You've been like the biggest parts of my journey here, so thank you. And I also want to give a second note of gratitude to Bryn Saito and Timothy Hernandez, who both had such beautiful words that I couldn't help putting into my thesis. So this is Bloodtree Blooming, and I'll first be reading the quotes that introduce my thesis. So, do you ever feel alive with someone else's memories? Prince Saito. We are the redemption our grandparents sought. Tim Z. Hernandez. So throughout my thesis, I have photos in place of sections. I didn't want to separate the poems in my thesis by subject or voice because they all felt so interconnected. So I have photos such as this one as section breaks, and this is a photo of me and my great-grandfather. And in many ways, I feel that my manuscript has been built since roughly 2021. At that time, I felt very pulled to write about my great-grandfather because of this unique dynamic in which I attended his funeral, but I didn't know who he was. It just happened during a trip to Mexico. And so there was something about this ancestor connection that I felt called to explore in my writing. And as I learned more about him, it became more of an interrogation, which I'll get more into. But this first poem is for him, titled Departing as Unclaimed. There's no defense for how they will fail you. All but one of your children absent when the gangrene leaves you bedridden in the hospital. No comfort to offer as you leave this earth alone on the eve of a new year. There's no forgiveness I will ask on their behalves as they hurry your funeral, yet fight for ownership of your home, land, all of it your stubbornness never passed down. There's no seam these words can weave as Almanza siblings drift apart among an explosion of stars. There's no essay of sorries I can offer to void the years I'll forget you. Kin I cleaved from my tongue until 19. There's no string of words I can cast to extract this repentance I've inherited. There will be no trickle of your name except my abuela calling your son, Valentin, for dinner. There will be nights I find him drunk and tender, enough to remove the niñez tucked in his teeth. De una forma u otro, cada persona sufrimos de todo. But even as he tells me of your lightlessness, my abuelo, hijo that he is, will still paint your memory with warmth. Okay, this next poem is inspired by that photograph, titled Requiem, in which Bisnieta ponders the deceased. Picture infant in bisabuelo's embrace, his legs before the star bomb of gangrena, his face blossoming with some unlocked pride, his arms after days of crushing sun wishes. What secrets did he hear as his head rested against mine? Would he beam still now that no. Sleep my queerness and salvage this light as he holds me softer than a grudge. This next poem, I really have to thank my friends and family members who answered this very random question of when life gives you lemons, and I incorporated some of those answers into this poem. So if you hear yours, you made it in. Question, when life gives you lemons, A, make lemonade. Sour things are not meant to be sweet. Even if you caress lemons before knife, it will still bleed, weep for you. When I called my abuelo Tito for the first time, he didn't weep at the butchering of his abuelo right. Despite his body growing with the sound of muchacho in place of mijo, Valentin, despite his name being passed down by father whose clenched hands never loosened for an embrace, despite his mother whose eyes refused to cradle his body at 92. When I called my abuelo Tito for the first time, he held his not name with a smile. B, throw them back. Other variation, throw them at your enemies. Tito confesses my bisabuela would threaten a list. Tu abuelita, hacías algo malo, ¿ok? Aquí voy a apuntar en esta libreta cómo fuiste malvado. Tú no hiciste esto. A tu papá le voy a dar toda la lista. Bisabuelo disciplined with each claim, some true, some magnified, all hits equal. Still, Tito cradles fruit in his hands, hesitating before breaking skin, and I marvel at my bisabuelo's failure to make a sour man out of him. See, keep one and share the rest. Tito could easily spit acid, but even when I crashed golf cart into ditch, even when cousins convinced me to do donuts, even when I pushed past imaginary speed limit, Tito honey hushed. Ya no sirve. Todavía no lo han arreglado. I stopped asking after the 5th time, and though I missed joy rides, I left grinning, a wildflower watered with sugar. Fact, it never did. Lemons are a hybrid between citron and pomelo fruits, border crossing between sweet and tart, two worlds, unnatural marriage. In the 80s, Tito walked over a mile daily to receive a ride to work and back from stranger. Él nunca me llevaba a la colonia. Yo caminaba diario, 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 diario. Even living in the gang-ridden South Side with my abuelo working in fields from 5 to 5, my mother and her brother remember most limoncillo, wild weeds they pluck and suck like lollipops. Once when Colonia came up in conversation, my tío's eyes lit up, reminiscing about its taste, memories binding family despite sledgehammer pasts. Correct answer? Make lemonade. Even after machismo bruised child body, after his exile for owning Casa Almanza, Tito grandfathers like Menudo, hearty and perennial. So, given that this manuscript has a lot of my grandfather in it, I also wanted to give him a voice within the manuscript. So I'm gonna zoom in a bit so you can see the shape a bit more. This is titled Momia, which for those of you who don't know Spanish is also the translation of mummy and is a play on mom in there, so Momia. ¿Dónde estabas en mi nacimiento? En las fauces de la llorona o en el vientre de tu esposo. ¿Y por qué dejaste que se tragara nuestro nombre? Solo tenía hambre de tu sonrisa, pero en cambio me diste tu enojo envuelto en oro. ¿De dónde naciste tanta ira? ¿Que no puedes oler mi miedo a vivir como mi papá? También a morir solo. Verdad sea enterrada, desde que te alejaste de mí, a veces camino anoche con la esperanza de encontrarte llorando por mi regreso. Tongue of Abuelo's Grief, #2. Es triste ver, recordar. My grandmother never fed me when she made food for my tíos on Sunday mornings. My grandmother, warming tortillas on the stove beside them. My grandmother, unaware of my presence in the back until Tío rose from his seat. My grandmother who would say, Órale, váyase con su madre, que le da a comer allá. But my mother never fed me caldo or cariño. And my father, he would fill my stomach with fists. Before, I might have believed that Sundays were meant to be days of prayer, of rest. No one told me El Cariño rested on these days too. So to take a break from that heavy material, I, as Mai Der mentioned, have a series of instructions poems in my manuscript. And these poems are meant to examine stereotypes and expectations of certain roles in my family and culture And this one specifically is more of a lighter poem to show how my grandfather subverted what he learned was a grandparent and made it his own version. So, instructions for a well-being. 1. Mientras estás creciendo, do not flinch when your father reaches for you. Swallow each fist raw and whole so your children never have to. 2. Cuando tu padre te lleve al campo, aprende. During each border crossing, memorize the streets. Un día tú también serás americano. Do not think about the coyote who almost killed you. During each hour, remember, even crops need to be cradled. 3. En cada fiesta, baila con las chicas y pregúntalas sus nombres. When you find the one named after a prayer, recuerda su rostro. Durante tu vida, entiende tu nombre. Nunca serás un santo para tus padres. Tus hijos te llamarán papá, that tender mark you didn't give to yours. Your eldest granddaughter will butcher your abuelo right y te dará un nombre nuevo. Hold it in honey of her. Dimensions of Bisabuelo's Deathland. Bisabuelo reigns altar. Leg cohete by gangrena on the eve of 2014. Lips that sold dulces on the south side of the city. Mind that gate-kept pan dulce recipes from wife and siblings. Calloused hands that struck sons and threatened daughters. I wonder how those same hands held me softly in 2002. If my body still harbors the machismo, ghosting what little love they reserved. Would he hold me still if he knew more than my name, knew of my love for a woman and how there's no room for a man in my own heart? I rarely worry if Tito will accept me, heart tenderized by Niñez starved of such affection. Still, he lights each candle beside his father's stoic face, coats tongue in prayer each year to activate the flower bridge for Bisabuelo's November pilgrimage. Why do we honor even the ones who paint our blood trees? Is it to salve our equal wounds or balm our relief for their absence? What good is any right for the wrong ancestors? I look back as Tito's eyes river with something close to nostalgia. Maybe he dreams death made his father softer, that he might harvest from the same patch of love I once slept in. Maybe he hopes these acts will earn him open arms at the hour of his own death. Even after all the father bruises, Tito offers Bisabuelo a smile. Maybe this ritual was never meant for the dead, but for those of us who survived them. So in my manuscript, I also have poems in my perspective and the imposter syndrome that I often felt growing up as a light-skinned, non-Spanish speaking, second generation Mexican American. And one unique thing that I thought was normal for everyone was when I eat acidic foods like lemon or chile, my tongue will blister. And I just thought that everyone's eating these foods and dealing with it like I was. So it was very hard for me to eat the foods my grandma would make or that we would have, at parties because it was painful for me. And it wasn't until a few years ago that I learned this is called geographic tongue. And essentially there's a protective layer of my tongue that just degenerates over time as I eat these foods. There's no researched cause or remedy for it. So I just hurt myself every time I choose to have Takis or something. So I just felt like this really encapsulated that imposter syndrome that I felt. So these next two poems will sort of delve on that. And this is titled Geographic Tongue. And the form is meant to sort of mirror what my tongue can look like when that happens. So just imagine geographic tongue. No one told me there's a life without rashes. Do you know how many times I'd pour Mexico into mouth and feel the puncturing of apex, a dozen blisters on body? I'd devour Valentina until roots dried in milk and acid, swallow 60 sabritones as lips mountained with saliva and salt. I'd wolf abuelas nopales and howl this resuscitated river, this map tethering figure to ancestors' grief, this tongue that heals only to burn again at the swaddle of its birthright. Instructions for nieta being. To be ideal nieta, extract English till every pariente looks in surprise for fluency, no longer alienated, and plunge gut in Chile till abuelos cheer for sore geography, no longer dare to drown, and burn whiteness of skin till all vecinos finally see you as Susi's biological blood, no longer by marriage, and document family histories, migrations, till Mexican airlines allow you to board with Morena mother, no longer kidnapped, till you can translate poems for abuelos, no longer distanced by words, till your roots of American complacency run brown as ancestry, no longer filled with colonizer seeds, hasta que pienses en español y sueñas en español, y ames y respires y mueras en español, no longer unclaimed. So these last few poems will be examining more of the joy and the hope that my family brings me, and I hope my family experiences and that I witness. So this poem is titled Upon Playing Blackjack with Abuelo. Tito sits at the table watching as Papa and I play blackjack. Yo quiero jugar, Tito says. Necesitas 21 para ganar, I explain, and help him count. My abuelo, possessing only a 5th grade education. My abuelo, happy to be included in a game. My abuelo, hopeful even with a total of 14. 5 rounds in, and he laughs each time. I envy his joy, unmarred by loss, and I wonder how long his optimism took to grow, or was it inherent? I want to toss my cards and say, Tito, teach me how to love my hands. Amor de otro mundo. If instead of cutting silence with accented I love yous, you held your tongue each time, if instead of attending Nieto's school performances, you preferred to stay home, if instead of teaching me at 4 the alchemy of abuelo speaking, you left me on the porch alone, as your abuelos did to you, if instead of granting blessings to each partner your children chose, you dictated their hearts, if instead of taking your children to Disneyland despite the bills, you refused to take them out, if instead of celebrating their birthdays, you sent them to the fields as your father did to you, if instead of desiring fatherhood, you detested it, if instead of immigrating to America, you remained behind for, if instead of eloping with Maria, you returned to that house which gave fists the same name as love, if instead of finding hope in another country, you became the man your father wanted you to be, if instead you became your father, if instead you didn't become my mother's father, know that in at least one world you did. You survived, you loved, and you were loved in return. And so this is the last poem of my manuscript, and this is the image that ties it all together. It's a photo of me and my grandfather, who's still with us, just, out of state as of now. So this is titled Sensontvuelo, which is a combination of sensontle, the Spanish name for American mockingbird, and abuelo, so Sensontvuelo. or grandfather with 100 voices, whose sun trills went unanswered for 21 years. What sueño seeds burned in your belly as you swayed to Los Tigres del Norte, my grandmother's prayer hands around your neck? Did you flinch when the fireworks went off because they mirrored your father's pistola voz? What wounds were plucked from your body before the first migration, coyotes nearly jaw-breaking your story? And how long did it take your alegripio to return after they separated you from your wife, her mind pregnant with the fear you're still extracting? If only you knew then your life is worth more than the cheapest cycle pump along the border. What season do you live in now, all crack-feathered and winter-mouthed? Is it hope or desperation that keeps you whistling in the dark? Sensuelo, will you teach me how to howl among pages that know not where your voice ends and mine begins? You must trust that I poet to debride our dendrology of injuries, each line splintering your youth's threnodies. Sensuelo, would you love me? I'd sooner blanket crepuscular heart than risk prescription of prayers. Woman-loving nieta I am, know not to profess my nature that halts our lineage. Abuelo you are, having kissed machismo on the fist, surely you've departed your father's shadow. Sensuelo, promise me this, at the hour of my queerness, fly not, but cradle me closer. Thank you.